Hi, Dan Freidenberg for FIGGERRIDOUT.com, phonofixing.com. I'm a fisherman's friend. That's not a fisherman's friend. It's a Ricola. Got a Ricola in my mouth. Sorry about that. You can comment to say it's like I hate when people talk with throat medicine or a lozenge in their mouth, but I'll do what I can to try and hide it. Anyways, today I'm talking about this book right here, 1,000 Years of Nonlinear History, with this eyesore of a cover. I had this in paperback back in Taiwan. This is the hardcover I ordered specifically just for you guys. Isn't that nice? And I appear to be roughly halfway through it. It was basically speed reading, but this is a heavy book. This one has writing problems. Okay. So I see that the name is Manuel de Landa. Manuel, that is obviously either Spanish, Portuguese, something like that. What's it about? Well, first, like they spend a chunk of time talking about what the title even means. Okay. The best way I can describe this, and I apologize for non-video gamers, but if you've ever played the Civilization games or the Age of Empire games, those all go through different geographic areas of the world, like for example, India. The leader of India is Gandhi for some reason, and there's also like they end up putting them like it's all. I don't even remember which one's which because I didn't spend much time. But the idea is that people generally think of the inventions that we've created as a species, and we assume that it was basically inevitable. It was in a straight line. In other words, first you make the wheel, and then you make this, and then you make that, and then, like the printing press is in there, and then that changes a bunch of things. But, and then after that, you end up, making guns, for example. I think they had basic guns before the Europeans had the printing press. The Chinese, of course, had a printing press long before Gutenberg. But basically, so next thing they'd say is like, okay, so then guns and then cannons and, like also like longbows and swords. And then, eventually it gets into textiles. So, so then you have like the cotton ginny, and you've got, like bigger and better looms and all that kind of stuff. And it makes it sound like, progress is all going in one direction. And the entire title, 1,000 Years of Nonlinear History, so they're talking about the year 1000 to the year 2000. The whole point of the book is to say that that's not an accurate description of what was going on at all. It's nonlinear, and he proved his point in several different ways, or using metaphors of interpretation for what's going in the world. Okay, so the sections he has is lavas and magmas. Okay, so those would be the states of stone. Flesh and genes. Okay, so that would be both our own evolution in bodies and all that kind of stuff, as well as what would be called the transference of biomass. Transference, in other words, transfer, in other words, the trade, moving around. Biomass, okay, that's stuff that was or is alive. Now, most people call that stuff food. Okay, so stuff that was alive that gets moved around for people or whatever, that for other animals, that's food. Okay, so it's also agriculture. Okay, so that's what that whole section is about. The next section is memes and norms. So they're talking about linguistics and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you look at that, you'll still have no idea what the hell they're talking about. So what they're talking about is they're talking about how if one thing shows up, it'll make an impact. But if two of the right things or three of the right things show up in the same time in the same place, then all three of them are going to grow way more, okay, and way faster. So the example And I guess that would be, yeah, I guess it's in the flesh and genes section. But basically, the textile industry just exploded with the Industrial Revolution. I've been thinking about the reasons for that. I think that one thing I've been spending a lot of time on when I'm looking at books on economics and stuff like that, or even when I'm looking at taxation, is I'm looking for what roles women had in the creation, implementation, or observable, the noticeable bits of society. I go, which part of those seem to be like a due to female influence rather than male? And I think men in general are much more satisfied to wear old and or dirty clothes, but that's also because men generally are pushed to dirty jobs, and women are kept away from dirty jobs, and dirty jobs are generally not fun. So right there, basically that means that if somebody wants to get into them, it like like being someone who handles trash, picks up trash cans and stuff like that. It's little kids do say, "Oh yeah, I want to be a garbage man when I grow up." But I think like maybe if you have no sense of smell or something. But it's definitely hard work. It's definitely monotonous. You're definitely doing something great for the world because like people need that stuff out of their lives, and people are pretty clueless as to the effects of like what do you do when there is an environmental danger? Most people don't know. Even me, I'm still pretty inadequate when it comes to environmental hazards. I know that the biggest thing I do is dig them out, but whatever. The thing about the cotton ginny that I wanted to emphasize was the cotton ginny came around at the same time as the railroads were taking off. Okay, so the idea is so like the cotton ginny. I don't even know what the thing looks like. Okay, I should look it up. But they mention this as being very important in this book. It must be the device that's used to take cotton off of the plant more easily, so it doesn't have to be picked by hand. By hand, it's awful work because it's in a super hot spot. It's not a nice thing at all to be doing. That's why they had enslaved people. Okay, keep that in mind. So saying slaves is not okay anymore, and I'm actually behind this. I'm actually behind that idea. They say you shouldn't say slaves; you should say enslaved people, because when I think of the word slave, I think it kind of implies that the slave is somehow at fault for their position in life. Like maybe. Well, let's look at the U.S. Penitentiary system. Like they work without pay and they can't leave. That's slaves. That's and like in that case, people would say it's like, well, yeah, they became slaves because they broke the law, and that isn't always the case. Unfortunately, some innocent people end up being put in jail, and then we say, oh, oops, sorry, and then pay them some money and pretend that that's okay when you're replacing part of somebody's life and making it a living hell in return for some money. And most people wouldn't take that deal. So, that's why we have to be super careful about not putting people away who are innocent. But when it came to the slaves, the enslaved people, predominantly in the South, all over the world, the ones that were shipped out from Africa, generally, like the history that I know is that the slaves who were sold were actually the ones who lost wars in Africa. So the families of people who lost wars, the awful victors would say, okay, we're going to sell off the males as slaves. I suppose that's probably so that they wouldn't fight back and take power back. And who knows what the background is. I'm sure that there were some that it was because they were a small group who ended up deciding to rise up against the current power. Sometimes they were the current power, they just needed more money. And so they decided, I'd get rid of these guys because it's convenient. No matter what, it's an awful, awful situation. And for other people to come to Africa and say, hey, you got enslaved people, I'll buy enslaved people, it's every bit as bad. Everybody's hands are dirty on that one. Anybody who is involved, your hands are dirty on that. Why do I seem so cool about it? It's because I read back 10 years ago that there were like fewer than 300 slaves in the history of Canada. And I think like 6 of them were black. The rest were Native Americans. And generally, and of course in Canada, it's like, there's no cotton to pick in Canada. Okay. The way the climate goes, it's like, no, not in Canada. You're not getting cotton plants in Canada. It's too freaking cold. So that's why I can come off a little bit, come off as being smug when it comes to enslaved people in the history of Canada. It's a nasty situation no matter what way you slice it. So the Cotton Ginny came out at the same time that the railroads were getting humongous and popular. And then they also had better and better looms, industrial quality looms to make clothes. And so it's hard to understand that, like when you look in your closet and you see your 6 shirts and your 6 jackets, or maybe it's 20 or like whatever, and these shoes and these socks and all this kind of stuff, that wouldn't have happened around 1800. There's like, if you read I was talking about the show Elementary and Sherlock Holmes. If you read old Sherlock Holmes, one thing they'll say is he was able to tell if somebody was left-handed or right-handed by looking at their jacket. Now, we can't do that in 2020. That's not possible. The way that he knew is he looked at the elbows, okay? The elbows of the jacket, okay? If you're left-handed, your left elbow will be all worn down on the jacket because like jackets would take like a ton of time to make and you'd only own one, okay? So this one would be perfectly fine. But a right-handed person, this elbow would be all worn down from writing all the time. At least like that's if they're an accountant or something like that. Okay, if they were in finances or numbers and writing and stuff, you can look at their clothes and find that out. But I remember seeing that, I'm going like, huh, what? Like, why didn't I ever notice that that's the case? And it's because it's not the case anymore. People have more jackets, so they won't wear one that looks all worn down on one elbow in general. What was I talking about women for? I was talking about women because I think women tend to buy more clothes than men. Is that a problem? Not really. I do think that men generally think that what women do to take care of themselves is a complete waste of time, and I think they're inaccurate about that. I do think it's a good idea for men to generally take a little bit of care of themselves, even if they're not very nice on the eyes. Basically, that there's something you can do to make yourself more presentable. I'm sure there's something you can do to make yourself more presentable, and it helps. People want to spend time with attractive people, okay? And that's why I was very I did a lot of guess and check, finding out how to make myself look better. But the idea is that if the Cotton Ginny came out, it wouldn't be that big a deal. If better looms came out, it wouldn't be that big a deal. If the railroads came out, it kind of wouldn't be that big of a deal for that sector, okay? But when all 3 happen at the same time, it goes kaplow. I guess the market was flooded with cheap clothes and it got humongous, right? So that's not linear. That's not linear because all 3 of them were building themselves. They were building each other to have a much better growth in that industry. Okay, that's what they're talking about non-linear. Okay, so if it was a line, then this happens first, that happens next, boom, 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 boom. But these 3 things happen at the same time, so that's why it became part of history. It was noticeable because the 3 of them were able to make something bigger that one on its own wouldn't have been able to accomplish. Lavas and magmas. Okay, that was section 1. What is that talking about? He talks about the mineralization of people and cities. Okay, mineralization, so minerals, okay, rocks, and basically think the three little pigs, right? First one made his out of straw, made his house out of straw. The second one made it out of wood. Third one made it out of brick. Brick is a mineral, okay? Mineral it has the word mine in it, mineral, okay? It's like rocks and stuff. So basically, what he's saying is that if you were an alien and you were watching human progress, like in fast forward, the thing you'd notice was the mineralization of the cities. So the fact that walls actually started being created out of limestone, more specifically concrete, right? So they mix the cement, the limestone in together with an aggregate and all that kind of stuff, put in some water, put it in a particular place, it'll solidify. So you got rock walls and all that kind of stuff. And so it's saying that if you look at the history of what we were doing with rocks, it was nonlinear. It was like slow and steady. Like one thing had come out and it didn't really matter until something came out that, you know, worked together with that to basically a 1 + 1 = 3. That's what the whole nonlinear history thing is talking about. 1 + 1 = 3. So if you're looking from space, everything looks like trees. We cut it down, you know, it's still green or whatever. But as soon as you start mineralizing cities, then it starts looking a lot like what you see in chemical reactions. So the other thing he does is he looks at the big picture and then the small picture, saying, okay, if you're looking under a microscope and you see something that looks exactly the same as when you're looking from space at a city, like it basically looks like kind of like those little trees that you get that get the salt rocks. You put the salt water in the bottom, or the sugar or whatever, and then the liquid will actually diffuse up through the paper of the tree, okay? And it'll actually bring some of the salts and stuff from the water up with it, and then it grows out into these crystals out the side. And that's basically what a city looks like from space, right? You look at a city and you'll see these rocky bits expanding out that actually looks exactly like how salt crystals grow. So he's basically saying that, you know, these are things that if you look at the small and you look at the big, you'll be able to see it's like, no, these are non-linear. So if you want to understand how things actually work, and I guess that would be like if you're observing another society. So this is really an anthropology book, I suppose you could say. So that's how they're saying with stones and stuff like that. That would even like minerals, lavas and magmas. And then the last one was talking about linguistics and stuff like that. This is a tough book to read, okay? The idea behind it is a really neat idea. It didn't need to be as complicated as that, but I'm really glad the guy did as complicated of a job as he did, because, you know, you'll learn a ton of shit from this book in general. Even if you are a bit of a know-it-all, you'll learn a ton of shit about just a different way to look at things. Now, of course, he's a materialist, and that's part of the problem, okay? Just so I've gone through materialism, I've done that a bunch of time in these videos. Materialism, the opposite would be idealism. And you still don't know what that means unless you study philosophy. What it would be is it's like a chicken and the egg question. Okay, which came first, awareness or stuff? Okay, if you'd say stuff came first, we came second, awareness came second, then you're a materialist. If you say no. There's never there's never been any indication that material can even exist until somebody's observing it. We only notice that they're actually both at the same time. Whenever stuff exists, that's when somebody is aware. If you have the awareness first perspective, that makes you somewhat of an idealist. If you have the stuff like planets and stars, basically the universe was here before you, the universe will be here after you. If you believe that, you're on the materialist side. This dude's a materialist, okay? And actually, I think in a lot of ways he's actually arguing a lot of the idealist agenda for idealists without even recognizing it, which is kind of nifty. But no matter what, it's worth checking out. So I don't even think it's in print. I had to order a hard copy version. I wouldn't say you'd have to read it by any stretch of the imagination. I think that the stuff that I told you is probably enough to get the gist of it and help you think about stuff for a while, because I was thinking about it for quite some time after reading that book. But yeah, there it is. What am I doing? Why am I on my camera? Why am I talking to you? Well, the answer is I'm making one video per day for 366 days at least. And I'm always focusing on attention to detail. I've also got these awesome interviews that you should definitely check out with all sorts of experts. And on that one, I'm continuing my work in these daily videos here. It's just basically saying like, okay, it sure looks like this is the case. Like I'll see, okay, there's some sort of conflict or trouble in one particular area. And then I'll figure it out for myself and get my opinion. And then I'll be like, you know what? Maybe you've watched enough of these videos to take my word for it. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you should take my word for it. Maybe you shouldn't. And maybe I don't even know. So I interview somebody who is right in the thick of it, has a ton of experience, just, you know, like has way more experience than I have. And I pick their brains for you. I say, it's like, okay, you know, like I talk to real estate investors and lawyers, you know, like I just interviewed a real estate financier who is a licensed attorney, but he's just working on his own investments full time for his group of investors now. I was asking him about white male privilege. And so I was going like, okay, well, the things that I see is like, you know, the system is stacked. There are a bunch of things that make absolutely no sense. And they're absolutely, you can see that they're positioned in such a way that, you know, the monarchy used to be in charge, and this is still an extension of the monarchy trying to keep things simple for themselves at the expense of everybody else. I guess I should just go ahead and lay it out what I really mean. I just keep on finding that people are putting so much time and effort in their businesses into taxation and just doing what the fucking government asks them to. And like, even the government doesn't even know what you're supposed to do. It's clearly, you know, it's keeping people under the government's thumb. You know, you know, a lot of people, you know, like they depend on the government. Like the government is trying to make it so that you depend on them so that the system sticks around. The government tries to stop people from being able to save money, and they adjust the taxation to make sure that they're as powerful as they possibly can. I'd love to talk to politicians about this sort of stuff. And this is the kind of book that I use to support it. But anyway, as I was saying, the main reason why I wrote my book was my first book here, the big one, Figured Out, the Attention to Detail Handbook, is because I started thinking to myself, okay, I need a book. And what's the part that I find is different about me? And what are the parts that people like my bosses or whatever in the past, what was the real reason why, you know, they keep on laying off or firing my colleagues, but they keep me around, right? And the real answer is attention to detail. It's when push came to shove and there was a problem and it had to be sorted out, I'd actually go through it and I'd find the freaking answer. And the trick that I used was using attention to detail. I'd go one by one. I'd say, okay, how many factors are there? There are 10. Okay, let's go through all 10 of them then. Don't just go through 5. Don't go through 3. Don't just depend on your intuition or something like that. Actually go through them one by one. That's part of attention to detail. And it's especially important whenever you are starting a new career, or if you're an entrepreneur, you're constantly having to adapt to a changing market. And attention to detail is the part that helped me out when I'm working with the fucking computers all the time, you know, saying like, hey, this worked yesterday. Why didn't it work today? What was updated? What was broken? Who touched it? Like, how do we fix it? And like, and that's why the show's called Figure It Out. You know, half the time I'd end up calling support and I'd start off saying like, listen, I know you're first level support. I used to be first level support. I don't know how long you've been working there. If it's less than 6 months, there's no way you know the answer to this question unless you got super duper lucky. Okay. So I'm going to tell you, this is what's going on. And they're say, no, it's not that. Did you try turning it on, turning it off again? It's like, yes, I did. I already went through all those steps. I need you to make a ticket on this. This needs to be sent to the developers. And don't tell me it's because of my API stuff, because the part that's breaking has nothing to do with the API, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't make me sound like the nicest guy in the world, and I'm acutely aware of that. But basically what I'm really trying to say is if that attention to detail is what helped me find solutions to problems that everybody said were impossible. But this book here is to help you use attention to detail to change your career, build your career, build your business, more importantly, and that's what that's all about. And of course, one of the biggest things it's about is ethics and talking to people, because I think that's what's lacking. You know, people want to succeed, and the interaction with people is the part that people kind of want to skip, and they don't want to put the time in. And I managed to keep that nice and short back in that book. The link is in the description. It's in print, digital, so like Kindle version, and an audiobook version, which was by far the most popular way for people to consume that book. Other book, Eat Your Boss's Lunch, that's about starting your own agency and or business, doing what you already do at work. Okay, so it's a good little book there. The digital version's a book for $1. The print version's like $3. I guess I should probably record it and sell the audiobook version as well. But that's not done yet. What else? Funnelfixing.com. We're an ad company for your online funnel, for your online business. So we focus on campaigns instead of just one-off ads and stuff like that. In other words, you know, like the first ad should build on the second one. No, the other way away. The second ad should build on what the first one already started. Anyway, also I'm in commercial real estate. So my friends and I, we are buying apartment buildings mostly. We're also interested in self-storage. We're interested in bigger deals. And we've got the financing to make it work. We've got the operations teams, plural, to make it work. You know, right now, because it's the middle of September 2020, there's a big problem with supply chains and appliances. You know, it takes like 6 months to get an order of appliances very often. Especially these days, because the supply chains are so messed up. Lumber doubled in price in the last month or two, and that's causing some construction issues. And it's enough to make some people want to wash their hands of the whole thing, or at least stop operating. Okay, if you own an apartment complex, or there's somebody in your family who owns an apartment complex, there's plenty of reasons to want to get out. But the main problem that nobody has an answer to, except us, is what do you do with the cash? You just go ahead and get in contact. We have that part solved. Basically, if you want to go from being an active operator to becoming a passive operator, not only in your own building, but in others as well, because like operations hard work, you know, it's customer facing. You know, you do have to talk to these tenants, and of course, if you're like us and we tend to go for B-class areas, you know, you're going to have some people where, you know, maybe you don't want to deal with that person all the time, but you know, it's too late now. It's if you want the apartment building or any kind of commercial real estate to work, it's going to start and end on how you set the building together. In other words, like, are you making it so that your operations team, your maintenance guys, have to put in way more work? You know, things are falling apart because you're trying to go cheap on stuff, instead of us, where we make sure it lasts, because we're looking for a long time. We're looking to invest long term. Which is why, you know, you being along for the ride might make a lot of sense, because maybe you're having troubles getting the expense ratio down. So you're sitting there making like 10%, you know, like if you're making 10% on your money, that's good. But, you know, like the less the more it goes down, the worse it is. And it also depends on how many more people are in. So if you want out, or if you know a building that's in disrepair, not being taken care of, we definitely want to know, and we'll definitely pay people for giving us information on buildings that we end up closing. So definitely get in touch, all that kind of stuff. What else? Hey, if you want to be interviewed on Figure It Out, you can also let us know. Please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell. Make sure you comment, because we haven't been having a whole lot of people commenting. And I don't want to think that it's just because I'm right all the time, because I'm not right all the time. Anyway, I'll see you again tomorrow. Please do come back, and I'll see you then. All right. See ya.